social club hidden behind some residential houses over St. Helier way. He was a solid chap in his mid-50s with a firm handshake who laughed and joked a lot. I found him very funny. However, he hadn't long been released from prison, and I sensed he was focused on living his life, not writing about it. Besides which, I'd just finished writing George Best's book and had launched straight into Dave McKay's. It wasn't the time. 20 years later, it was. I joined my pals Jimmy and Wally Stockins and Gypsy Joe Smith in a trip over to Rains Park to have a drink with Dell and Ronnie. Ronnie was older, quieter, and more reflective than at our previous meeting, which, of course, he didn't remember. Ronnie and I chatted on the edge of the group, which got louder and louder as the John Smiths flowed. Some of the memories he shared that evening fascinated me. Joe Smith, who doesn't miss a trick, shouted over, "What don't you do on his book, Martin?" "If he wants to," I replied. What else could I say? We shook hands there and then. I've always wanted to write a true crime book, and this was my opportunity. I co-wrote a book called Grass with Martin King and Phil Sparrowhawk, telling of the exploits of Phil and Howard Marks, his partner in drug smuggling, which I loved doing. But it was that 1960s and 1970s London underworld I'd always wanted to delve into since I started writing, as my childhood had coincided with the great train robbery, Harry Roberts and the trials of the Richardsons and the Krays. At my comprehensive school in the 1970s, reading books for most schoolboys was only undertaken under duress as part of the educational curriculum. There were far more exciting things to do as a teenager. Two books did get widely read, however: Skinhead by Richard Allen and The Profession of Violence by John Pearson. One was the fictional adventures of a violent skinhead thug called Joe Hawkins. The other, the story of the Kray twins, real-life gangsters from London's East End. Both books, crumpled and dog-eared, were passed from boy to boy and read surreptitiously in lessons. The risk of confiscation and a smack around the head always present. When the skinhead phenomenon passed, the Allen book slid into obscurity, but Pearson's study elevated the Kray twins into mainstream folklore and propelled a previously marginal literary genre into the big time. Half a century later, Ronnie and Reggie are still a British obsession, and new books about them appear every year. This isn't one of them. This is the story of Ronnie Field, a South London armed robber. His criminal trajectory did overlap with the twins, and they became good friends, and the denouement of Ronnie's criminal career was being Charlie Kray's co-defendant following an undercover police operation. So, Kray brothers do figure in Ronnie's story, Charlie especially, but I believe Nefarious provides an insight into the criminal world in a less obvious part of the capital, where South London meets the suburbs. Ronnie Field reveals how an innocent little boy in Cheam in leafy Surrey ended up robbing banks, being affiliated with Joey Pyle and spending too many of his first 50-plus years on the planet in prison. Ronnie doesn't attempt to justify or glorify anything. It's what happened to him, and he hopes that his life may be of interest to others, be they true crime enthusiasts or those who simply enjoy working-class social history. Ron is one of the last men standing who lived in that now fast-disappearing criminal world. Armed robbers of banks, post offices and industrial premises seem almost as dated as highwaymen. The world has changed, and so has crime. As to whether the change has been for the better, the jury's out. Martin Knight, August, 2023. Chapter 1. We Are Family. My childhood was shit. I was one of the last workhouse babies, for starters. At least, I hope I was. The workhouse was the ever-present looming threat hovering above the working classes that dominated their fears and stalked their sleep. For many, it was considered a result to live a life that didn't involve entering the workhouse at one time or another. It was the last resort for food and shelter for the poverty-stricken, the destitute and the fragile.